Let's turn this into this beautiful friendship rock. Hi there, my name's Carolyn Dunn, and I'm a Dot Mandala artist, and I would love to welcome you to my channel. And this is the color palette we're working with today. Mermaid Tail, Sea Breeze, Gentle Heather, Wild Orchid, and in the Dazzling Metallics, Purple Pearl, and Glorious Gold. And I base painted with the CraftSmart black acrylic paint. And this is our inspiration piece. So I cast this rock with Ultracal 30. It's 4.75 inches in diameter, and I'm going to base paint it in the CraftSmart black paint. So my dear friend Michelle had purchased the inspiration piece to give to her bestie, but she loved it so much that she kept telling her friend that she wished she had bought one for herself. Her friend listened, and she wanted to get something special to give to Michelle as a token of their ongoing friendship. So she contacted me to ask if I could make a similar rock for Michelle, and of course I said yes. So, hence the name Friendship Rock. And we're just working on the front of this piece now, getting it base painted, and we'll do probably 3 coats before we start marking out our design. I use the Artistro paint marker pen. It's the extra fine point, and it's water-based, and it's in gold to sign the back. So I'm just using a Mylar stencil here. It's called the Flower Taurus, and it is supplied by Stencil Direct on Etsy. And I'm just tracing it out. I used a little bit of yellow tape to hold it on there with my chalk pencil. I use the Yoke chalk pencil, and it really works well for me, and the lines come off very nicely. So I'm just going to work away at getting this all traced on there, and then we'll move on by going over those lines with the same gold pen that we used on the back. Okay, so that gives us our design. Now let's just review our reference piece. Now here I was going to put in my center dot first. Now for whatever reason I decided no, I was going to do the gold lines first, and I wish I hadn't. And if I were to do it again, I would get that center dot in first, because it just made my life a little more difficult by not doing that. Now on the first piece that I had created, I used the Glorious Gold paint with a fine-tipped brush. These are just makeup brushes, but I thought I'd use the paint marker this time round. So, what's the first thing we have to do? Get rid of the chalk dust. And now we'll begin the lengthy process of getting these lines drawn in. And this process involves going through and doing all of the lines over once or twice and having a look at it and seeing if you need to beef up those lines. And then you go back and forth with black touch-up paint and your gold marker until you've got it just the way you want it. Now I have already signed the back of it. I named this piece Friendship, and I have 3 coats of varnish on the back. That way I can't mess it up when I'm working on it. I wanted to get this circle shape in first, just to see how happy I'd be with the pen as opposed to the brush. And I do like the cleanness of the lines. It's a little more accurate with the pen. This is a bit of a long process, so I'm going to speed this up for you. Oh, it's really starting to take shape now. I love it. Feels good to be back painting again. Now every once in a while you'll need to wipe off the end of that pen, because it will collect up that chalk dust and gum up the end of the pen. So there, we've got it all traced in, And now, as I mentioned before, we're going to go back and forth with the gold pen and the black base paint just to really tidy up those lines. And when we're happy with it, then we'll move on to the rest of the piece. It's a lengthy process, but I think we've got it where we want it now. Now we're going in with the 9.5mm tool and that glorious gold paint to get that center dot in. I won't lie, it took me a few tries. And now I'm happy with it. Yay! And now we'll use the Mermaid Tail paint to do a round of dots around that center dot. And unfortunately, I'm a little rusty because it's been so long that I forgot to turn the camera on. I used the 2mm tool to create that round of dots around that center glorious gold dot. And now we're going to go around here with the Mermaid Tail as well, since we've already got it out. And we'll use the 4mm tool to create these dots. Now we'll go in with the 2mm tool and the Sea Breeze paint and just create a center dot in those diamond shapes just outside the center dot, all the way around. And now we'll use the small end of that tool to create a dot above and below each of those center dots. Now, while we've got that Sea Breeze out, let's create some top dots on the Mermaid Tail with the Sea Breeze using the 2mm tool, all the way around, my friends. Now let's get out that gentle heather paint, and in those little triangles all the way around, we're going to place one center dot. I'm using the 2mm tool. If you want, you could go down to the 1.5, whatever you feel comfortable with, and you want to be able to get some dots around that. That's why I suggest maybe the 1.5 instead. Now we're adding some Mermaid Tail in between those Sea Breeze dots. And you want to really try to keep it off of the gold lines. So if you need to fix it up a bit using one of your silicone tools, that's what you do. You're using a really fine tip tool, even a toothpick or smaller, to get in between those dots. And they're just as random as you can make them. And whenever you're doing these tiny random dots, any random dots, make sure everything around them is dry already so that you don't get any bleed from one dot into the next. Once that's dry, and if you want to, you can go in and put some more dots, but just wait until it's dry and then see what you need. Well, I thought I had the camera on, but I didn't. So, while you weren't looking, I went in the negative space in between those diamonds closer to the center dot, and I used Dazzling Metallic's Purple Pearl paint to fill that in and really load that with paint so you get a lot of depth and texture with that. And creating these purple pearl petals. And just make sure that the base of those petals follow the circle around that center dot. You don't want to get into those mermaid tail dots. Okay, now we're going to use some of this wild orchid. So I'm going to just use the 0.5mm tool, so the large end of this tool, to create a dot in the center of each of these triangles. Now, using a fine tip tool, I'm just flipping this tool over and using the small end of the 0.5mm tool to create a dot in each of the points of the triangle. Then we'll fill in from there. Some smaller dots, and the rest of the smaller dots will be back in that lighter, in the gentle heather. And all the shapes below this will all be in the wild orchid only. So I'll move on to the other shapes before putting in the gentle heather, because we'll let that wild orchid dry. And we'll put in some of the larger dots with the 2mm tool, and then we'll fill in with the 0.5mm tool and a fine tip tool. And again, we'll let those larger dots dry before we go in to fill in with the smaller dots. Hey, I'm putting together a video of pieces that you may have created by following my tutorials, or if my pieces have been inspirational to the pieces you've created. If you don't mind, I'd love to include your work in this video. Please send me your pics. You can DM me on my Facebook page, Dunn Reimagined Designs. Thanks. Now that all those bigger dots are dry, let's go in and fill in. And we'll start with the gentle heather. So those first round of triangles were just in gentle heather. And this round started with the wild orchid, and now we're filling in with gentle heather. And you'll want to use a very fine tip tool to do this part. Now, before we move into filling in these other parts, I'm going to add another round of dots in the mermaid tail. And we'll use the 3.5mm tool to create these dots. And now for the next row of mermaid tail dots, we'll use the 3mm tool all the way around. Now we'll go in and fill in all those tiny little dots in wild orchid in the remaining few segments here. You just want to squeeze them in wherever you can get them. And you can make them different sizes, even with the same tool, just by putting more paint on and allowing that to drop down. Tap it a couple of times. And we just keep at it until we get them all filled in. And you may want to let it dry and go back and look and see if you can get some smaller dots in. Just continue until you're happy with it. We still need to go in and put in the random dots in that final triangle that's running along the bottom of this piece. But before we do that, let's get these sea breeze top dots in, using the 1.5mm tool for these ones. And we'll step down to the 1mm tool for these lower ones. And now I'm going back in with the wild orchid to get those tiny little triangles along the bottom edge. I'm sorry that there's just not a good way to show this, so we're doing the same thing with the random dots. So we're just starting off with the bigger dots, and then we'll fill in with smaller ones. Now we're going in along that bottom edge in between the triangles with another mermaid tail dot, using the 4.5mm tool, and then we will go back and top dot it with the sea breeze. Here we're just finishing up filling in the wild orchid dots in the bottom triangles. Now we're going in with the small end of the 0.5mm tool to top dot that round of dots surrounding the center dot. So you want something small enough that it's not going to obliterate the dot beneath it, and it will give your dot some depth. Now we'll move up to the 2.5mm tool to top dot those mermaid tail dots along the lower edge there. Filling in some more dots. Now we're going to trim the lower border of this piece using the 2mm tool and the glorious gold paint, and we're going to put dots connecting from the mermaid tail dot to the next mermaid tail dot. So start in the center, and then you should be able to put 3 more dots on either side for a total of 7 dots all the way around. Yeah, I like that. Now as I'm getting around here, I need to be careful not to get my hand in the paint there. There. She's all done and ready for varnish. I'll be using the Liquitex High Gloss Varnish and several coats. I already have 3 coats on the bottom, but I'm going to add another coat so I can get those edges on the underside. Classic overpour, a little bit too much there. You want a nice thin coat on there. And you want to be careful. If you put too much on, you have the risk of it running in or down and then onto the top part, and you don't want any of those dribbles there. So yeah, then we'll move on to the top. And now we'll let that dry. First round of varnish on the top side. Okay, time for a second coat of varnish. And I just put my varnish into a little flat lid here. And there she is, all finished. Isn't it lovely? Wishing the two of you continued friendship forever and ever. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing. And remember, until the next time, keep on dotting.